live again. A friend has suggested to me a way to copy videos from my phone more efficiently to my computer. It's a plug and go or something. Anyway, I'm going to sort that out later. Now, I've got a very important announcement to make. Obviously it will need verifying by other people, but James Roney has come across a solution to a magnet motor. Now, I have put linked in the description of this live stream to his video. Now, obviously, I mean, he just, I don't think he understands himself how it works, but I do understand it, and I'll explain it. I recently posted a comment on his channel about repulsion. Let me just grab a piece of paper. Hang on a minute. I only want one sheet. Oh. I was trying to grab one sheet and there's two sheets stuck together. This is what happens. Never mind, I might need another one if I make a mess of this one. Right, so now this is important because it will help you understand what's going on with his video. I'm sure you won't disagree with me when I'm making this video live, but I'm also I've actually got it unlisted at the moment because I'm going to schedule it as a premiere for tomorrow evening because it's early in the morning, and actually I need to plug my phone in to charge it because it's very low. I need to turn my solar charger on because battery's a bit low. Okay, so we're all familiar with, come on, what the hell? What's going on with this? My pen was stuck. Stuck in my box and it won't come out. Right. We all know about magnets. I tell you what, I'll fold this in half because I'm going to turn it over, then I won't have to. We all know about magnetic fields. When you have a magnet, I'm using the big black pen because it's easier. We know about the waveforms that come out of a magnet like this, but what we don't realise is that it's more complicated than that. If you put iron filings on a piece of paper and you shake them, you get a pattern, and there's actually much more going on. You have multiple little waves in the waveform, where the different, if you look at it under a microscope, there's lots of these little waves inside to make up the big wave, so sort of thing. So what we have is, if you have two like magnets, say this, let's draw another one. Let's say that's south and that's south. Right, you have two magnets both south, right? Now, if you bring the two south of the magnets together, they will push away each other, they will repel. So if you have a conduit or conductor, a magnetic conductor, between the two magnets, like a piece of rod, a piece of steel, right, then that magnetic field, that south, is going to travel through the iron, this south is going to travel through the iron, and you're going to have a collision you have two fields effectively cancelling each other out. They want to repel each other. So you have pressure against these two magnets, basically. So the steel, instead of wanting to stick to one magnet, it will be repelled by two magnets. Now, when you're using a very large magnet, a large magnet is actually made up of lots of little magnets. If you ever broken a magnet in half, if you break a magnet in half, you'll have two magnets, won't you? Now, and the fields on, let's say, split a magnet right down the middle, you'll have two south poles, basically like this, right? So think about that in terms of the way that the magnetic fields are compressed. The parts of the magnet are compressed to such a point that the fields merge and become one large field. But ultimately, the bigger the magnet is, if you're actually working with a very large magnet, let's say a really, really big magnet, then you're going to have, there's a lot more going on because you have a much larger surface area. You're going to have waves. There's going to be waves in that field, okay, like that sort of thing. You're going to have waves embedded in that large field, right? Now, if you put a piece of steel really close to that magnet, right across the top of the magnet, those waves can escape. They can actually escape. They can pass through the steel and out the other side, and you will have an influence effect on the outside of the steel because it'll pass straight through, like it will just go straight through. But if you have a gap of what was it, 1/4 of an inch or something like that, was it 2/8 of an inch, something, well, 3/8 of an inch, if you have a gap between the magnet and the steel, all these little wiggly bits of the field of the magnetic pole will actually cancel each other out. So you end up where the magnetism can't pass through the steel because it's cancelled out. So let's turn over, and here's our large magnet. Right, and we have a piece of steel. There's a gap, there's the space, arrow, that's the space, and there's our piece of steel going across there. Now what we have is lots of these magnetic fields. These little, they want to escape, but they reflect off the steel, so you have the same, more or less the same effect, where the steel blocks the field from escaping because it's trapped in a reflective surface area. So think of it like a mirror, and I've talked about this in my other videos before about magnetic mirrors and things, but I maybe didn't explain it too well. But basically what you have with a magnetic mirror is a situation where you have two fields that repel each other, and instead of the field actually escaping, it will cancel itself out. So you have a, so I've been working with these concentrics, although the concentrics, most of the concentrics I designed had both north and south fields. So I had a magnet facing inwards, magnet at the bottom facing inwards, and like this sort of thing, arrangement, right? And I call them my concentric, right? But, and I switched them because the centre core was biased with another magnet which subtracted, say, that field, that field, and that field, so that these three were subtracted and allowing these three poles to escape the other side. So that was a way of creating a magnetic switch, which is what I did in the past. However, it just posed problems because a lot of the flux lines that you need to generate power are destroyed by the fact that the subtraction of the field was absorbing that energy that we needed to generate power, so it wasn't very effective, which is why I kind of abandoned that. But it did show some really interesting effects. Probably better if I keep the paper straight, but it's hard for me to draw at this angle because I've got a camera over my right in front of me and it's difficult. But if you get, let me use a smaller pen. James has really emphasized a solution by having this shielding. I'm using a smaller pen so you can see, and he's layered it so there's a gap between his shielding and the back of the magnet. So imagine these blue lines, these thin blue lines are the shielding, and this in the middle is the air gap. By doing that, what happens is, so well, let's work on the back of this magnet, which is the shielding part. So the field is basically trying to escape, but it can't because all these little lines are hitting the steel and cancelling each other out. And so what happens is it reflects the field back on itself. So it's effectively shorting it out, just like when you're using two magnets of the same pole will push against each other. And the magnet itself is made up of lots of little waves, because if you break a magnet, you will find that the magnet in some parts, let's say we split it there. So let's say this side of the magnet is south and this end is north over here. What you end up finding is if you break the magnet right down the middle, this end becomes north and the piece that you broke against might be south. But you split the magnet further up and you might find out that this is south and this is south, because there's two fields pushing against each other. Depends where the magnet breaks. If a magnet breaks in a certain spot where and you can't push the two halves back together again, that's because the two fields are pushing. That's what amplifies the magnetic field overall over the distance of the magnet. When you have two pieces that are actually pushing, you will have situations where this is what caused the waves and the ripples in the magnet. You end up with pieces of the magnet. If you slice the magnet in a certain way, so let's say we slice the magnet there, that part might actually be north and this part might actually be south, but you might break it in a different place and, like I say, it might be two pieces of south. And this is what magnets are like. So imagine that is what's going on when the field that's coming out the back of the magnet here, you have lots of little souths all combining together to make a strong south field at the back. And all them little souths, because you have a gap between the steel and the magnet, they will repel each other and the steel becomes a reflector instead of an attraction. So ultimately the actual steel in there might actually be pulling. It might actually be pulling on the magnet. I'm certain it will. But because it's spaced at a certain distance, there'll be, and you have multiple layers of the steel, each layer subsequently will have less attraction than the previous layer, and eventually you end up where you have a null leakage. So because after a while you overcome that magnetic field's ability to escape the steel. So you have multiple layers, obviously, to depending on the strength of the magnet. The stronger the magnet is, the more layers you'll probably need, or the thicker the steel needs to be. And also the steel itself is folding that magnetic field back on itself. So if you have north over here, which is what I indicated over here, then some of that south is also going to leak through this steel, travel all the way back and loop back on itself and short out at the top. So anything that was trying to leak through this steel that's coming this way would travel along that piece of steel and short itself out at this top end here. So that would also create a short circuit of the magnetic field. So there's more than one thing going on. I mean, it's not just that the steel itself is reflecting, it's also that it's channeling that field away from this end and back on itself at the top. So you end up with a null charge at the back. So I did this test. I did a test like that using this nanocrystalline material. I'll just go and grab it. So this is a piece of nanocrystalline material. Now, a few months ago, you got this big magnet, put it on the back. This is a really strong magnet. Now, when you get the magnet on the back here, and we get our screwdriver, it's very weak there. It's very weak. So if I get my, and the thicker this is, because a lot of this field has been short circuited. Now if I take that off, it's very hard, and fold it back on itself, so the magnets like this, now we should have even greater short circuit of the magnetic field, and we do. So there's very little field coming out of this back because it's all travelling along this steel to this end, and it's shorting back on this magnet, which is, look how strong that is. Now if I just hold that there, hold this, you can see how strong that end is. But if I turn it around, it won't even pick it up. But turn it around this way, might do, just a bit. That's how weak it is. So this is nanocrystalline material, just very similar to steel, but it's more responsive at higher frequencies. So this is basically what James has got with his shielding for his magnets. Is the same principle with this as this material is here. But if this had gaps in it, let's take the magnet off. I haven't tried this actually, but if this actually has gaps in the layers, some of these layers are stuck together, so I'm not going to start peeling them apart, because what I will do is take this layer off there and find something to act as a spacer. I think this will work. So this is the spacer, and we have, I'll measure that, see what that is. And the spacer is 2.62 millimeters thick. Now let's put that on here, then put our other layer on top. Now we have double layered nanocrystalline core material. So now I'll get my magnets, put that on the back, and it's even weaker. Virtually nothing's coming through there now. And now on this side, really strong. So to show you again, it picks that up straight away. On the back side though, it can't even lift a screwdriver, look. It's struggling. That's how efficient. So this is what James is doing. He's putting insulation between the layers, which is improving his decoupling and shielding of the magnetic field, because the magnetic field can't pass through multiple layers where there's an air gap. So yeah, it's fairly simple and it's very ingenious what he's done. Obviously he spent a long time working on his projects, so I've actually spent over 7 years on mine, but there are certain idiocracies, or what do you call it, synchronicities, and lots of little gaps in knowledge that we overlook. And obviously air gaps are very important, and we have heard this many times from many people who talk about spacing is critical, and we don't always know what they're on about, but that seems to explain a lot. So there you go. That's my understanding of it. I'm sure there are people out there who will disagree and who will have a different perspective, but that is what I see when I'm doing this, is that the gap is creating a slightly reflective surface. Now, when I was talking about before, now here's a piece of steel, multiple layers, and they're all very closely bound together. As you can probably see, I've got loads of layers of steel here. Now if you get two magnets of the same pole, let's just get this magnet, and I put this magnet on here, it will stick really hard. If I separate this magnet now, I put that on the steel as well, bring the two together, there will be some repulsion. Now if I hold them together and I pull them apart, oops, I lost one of my magnets up the other end. Right, there's less attraction with these two magnets than there would be if I had just one, because there's a slight repulsion. Now this pulls a lot harder now. You can do the same thing by putting them on the opposite side of the steel. So these two magnets are the same pole, put both of them on opposite side, and there's less attraction there than there is with just the one. As you can see, when I pull it off, it makes my arm jump, but these two poles together are pushing against each other, and now it's quite easy to pull it apart. So it's that is what I'm talking about regards a large magnet against a piece of steel. It's obviously an air gap is critical. If you have an air gap, it's even more efficient. So if we get that bit of steel and I get this piece of plastic, let's put the rough side against, I'll turn it over. If I hold that like that, I'll get my clip to hold it actually, so I'll put this clip on here just to hold that in place, and make sure I get the right magnets. Stick that on there, that on there. They're actually pushing against each other. Look, you can see it more now. Look, they don't want to come together. Look, oop, that one's, where's that gone? Right, hang on. So having a gap, they don't want to stay together, they're pushing. Now they're pushing against the steel as well. So if I hold these together, if I can, hold these both together like this, the amount of attraction to that steel on the back is not much at all. You can see how it's flicking away because of the clip on the end. It's not very strong. But if I take one of them magnets away, oh, it's the steel's not close enough. Right, so, right, you get the idea what I'm talking about. We'll put that magnet in series with that one. Anyway, it does repel more when you have two like poles. I've got it the wrong way around now. Oops. Oh, damn it. I want to, oh, I'm trying to hold them together like this. Again. It's going to fly up across the room in a minute. So, yeah. So if I do it like that, look. Ah, it's flying, it's going to fly. Right, see, there's less attraction with two magnets than the, oops, damn it, split it again, keep joining, ah, less attraction with two magnets next side by side than there is with one, basically, because they're pushing anyway. But anyway, it works. It seems to be easier to see with a thinner piece of metal. Actually, that iron is pretty thick, so it works better with a nail file or something usually. And speaking of which, I've got my nail file here, so that's pushing against there. Put these on, so that's pushing against there now, so that should switch over to the other side easily. Anyway, I'm going on a bit now, too much. I'm just trying to explain it. Ouch, I trapped my finger there. Anyway, thanks for watching.